It took me 2 years to finally complete Hardscrabble Road. Turned it over to my agent, who still hadn't sold Carlos Moreno, and she said, "Great, glad you got the second book done. It's totally different genre. I'm gonna shop this to different editors, get to work on a third book." The Caretaker was born. So that became my third novel. Sent it to my agent. My agent said, "Great, get to work on a fourth." My agent's got that one. She's got Hardscrabble. She's got The Caretaker. And I still haven't made a dime as a writer. Working full time. I love being a kept man. I love being able to get up every day and, focus on nothing but writing and keeping house, doing all the cooking and all that. That was all great. But it was really hurtful to my pride not to have made a dime. It was around 2008. A friend of mine approaches me. I'd been president of the Atlanta Writers Club for a few years. This person followed me into the presidency, and he had a friend who was looking for somebody to write a book for him. It was going to be a kid's book. He's part of a group that does motivational talks for kids, and they wanted an adventure story for children, especially boys, because it's really hard to get boys to read. My friend said, "Hey, do you want to collaborate on this book for kids? They'll actually pay us." And so I agreed to do that. And took about 6 months. We produced an adventure story for them that also got in their leadership ideas for kids. And I finally got a check for my writing. So what did I do? I photocopied that check, framed it, put it on the wall, and I quit. Put those writing dreams away, fired my agent, and went back to work full time. 2012, my father-in-law passes away. He never asked about the book. To him, me never bringing up, the fact that the book was ever sold, which it never was, all that just confirmed his initial comment, which was nobody would care. Nobody did care. About 2 weeks later, I was at a book signing for a friend of mine, somebody I had been encouraging and all of that, and I'm going to support him, so I'm going to show up to his book launch. And I get there way early. There's nobody in the bookstore except the bookseller, my friend who got there way early too, so he could sweat and read through his notes over and over and over and over again with shaky hands, and his publisher, because he's very supportive of his authors. Well, I can't talk to my friend because he's as nervous as a kitten, and the bookseller is busy, so there's the publisher, a guy named Bob Babcock. So I talked to Bob, and eventually the conversation works around to, "Well, George, have you written anything?" And by that point, I had 3 books that I could have talked about. But which one am I going to tell him about? My father-in-law just passed away 2 weeks before, and he was on my mind all the time. And so I told him about, a kid, surviving incredibly difficult childhood, a childhood that I think would have killed most of us. He said, "Well, that's really interesting. Would you send me the manuscript?" And so he got the manuscript on a Saturday. He sent me updates throughout the weekend. "I've got other things to do, but I can't put your book down." And by Tuesday, I had a publishing contract. So it took me 8 years and 4 months or something like that to get this book published. And then in the successive years, he published 5 Destinies of Carlos Moreno and then The Caretaker. And I've got a new book coming out, a mystery this time, in October called Aftermath. The one problem he had with this book was the title. It was not called Hardscrabble Road at the time. It was called Provenance, because if you remember the book, the kid is obsessed with where he comes from, because his family's always kidding him, "Oh, you were found in a gopher hole," and nobody ever owning up to the fact that he's part of this family. And it turns out, as we learned, that is in question. So I thought, well, provenance is a perfect word to describe, pedigree. It's where you come from, it's your origins. It's a perfect word to describe his main concern in his life is, where do I come from and who are my parents? And the publisher said, there are 3 problems with that title. Nobody knows what it means, nobody can spell it, and people will confuse it with that place in the south of France, Provence. So I'm going to publish a book, but it's not going to be under that title, so get to work on another title. I wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning and I think, for years when I've been pitching this book, I've been describing his hardscrabble childhood. Get on my computer and I write to Bob at 3 in the morning and I say, "Hey, okay, how about Hardscrabble for the title?" And he responds at 6:30 in the morning, a more reasonable hour, and he says, go on to Amazon and just type in the book section, Hardscrabble. Tell me how many hits you get. You get something like, at that time, 56 hits with books with the word Hardscrabble in the title. He said, I'm not going to publish, number 57. It's hard enough to sell books. I don't want you to get lost, among all these other Hardscrabbles. Go back to the drawing board. Go back to sleep that night. Wake up at 3:30 in the morning again. And I think, there's a road that goes past their house, and I called it one thing, but I could call it Hardscrabble Road, because I live in West Roswell, and there's a street just 5 minutes from me called Hardscrabble Road. So I sent that to my publisher, and I said, why don't we just change that name in the book, go through and do a find and replace, and call the book Hardscrabble Road. And he said, yeah, I like it.